Hi there and welcome back to the Complete C Sharp Masterclass. In the first part of this module, we had a look at how we can build a tiny link service for an API where we can take a very long link and we can make it into a short link, and we can keep track of how many times that link has been viewed by a specific user. So let's have a look at how we can go about doing this now and how we can go about refactoring it and making it much cleaner and easier to understand. So the first step to this is we're going to create an iTinyLink repository, and we're going to follow Yagni here just to be able to add a link, get a link, and then we're going to go and say we're going to create a task, and we're going to say bool save changes. So we're going to need to be able to save the changes. That's something that we have seen. And then we're also going to need to update the link. So here we can go and say update link, which needs to basically just update the changes that need to be done. And that's pretty much it for the link repository. And then we also need to create basically the same thing for we need to create one for the visit repository as well. So we need to create a visit repository which will say add visit, and again at this point we are violating dry, but for the sake of simplicity we will first start off with a basic repository, and then we can see how we can go about maybe adding something like a generic repository. So again, here we can go now, say get visit, and we can get a visit by again a tiny link as well. Yeah, we should be able to go and change it. Let's just see how we're currently getting a visit. We're getting one based on a query. So yeah, we should be able to actually say give us this based on the query. So tiny link query. So here we'll say query, and again here we'll probably also just go and say link. Or do we actually need this by this? Let's just see. So right now we're querying it by 3 items: the link ID, the IP address, and the device, to see what device was looking this up. So we should be able to say, I think for the sake of simplicity for now, we'll just leave this as get visit by query, and for now we'll just leave this as query. We can create a visit query perhaps. And the visit query will maintain all that data that's in there. Public class visit query. So the visit query will maintain all the data that is related in here. So that's going to be a UUID and 2 strings. So here we're going to have a visit query that's going to maintain a public GUID link ID, and then we're going to get a string for an IP address, who is the user that's trying to access this, and lastly we're going to need a string of the device. So string device. Okay, so these are just really simple repositories. We'll see how we can go about making this slightly more complex later onwards. And here we can do this get link by hash, because we really actually only need the hash for this. We don't need the entire link. This will save the changes. This will update the link and return an updated. Oh, this is actually going to update the visitor, not the link. So visitor or visit. So update visit. So now we have these 2 repositories there, so we can move this over to a different class for now. and we can just create the instance of these models. So let's remove this for now, and then we're gonna just copy this and we're gonna create another repository for the visit, so that these are separated and each repository does its own thing. Visit repository, and we're gonna look at visit repository, and this will just be tiny link repository, and we will implement this. So now in here we're going to tell the service we need the database inside of this. We need the database inside of the repository. We actually don't need this, we can inject it directly in here. So then what this is basically doing is it's just saying, hey, when we're registering the database over here at DB context, if you actually have a look at this, it actually injects the database so that we can use it throughout the lifetime, and by default it's added as scoped. So we'll go into a bit more detail of this, but it really just tells the middleware, hey, create a new instance of this that we can use whenever we ask for it through the controller or through some sort of property. So here we can now go and say we have a tiny database over here. So we should be able to go and say add a tiny link here, and then we're going to say response, and then we're going to say save changes. We're going to add an async here, and then we're just going to say await. We can also add this async. So this is another thing when we're looking at asynchronous and non-asynchronous programming. If we add async, this is going to add a new task in the background and run on a separate thread than it is on the current thread. So it won't stop the main thread from continuing to do what it needs to do. This is useful when you want to still have an interactive user interface, rather than like having a blocking thread, then nothing else continues. Okay, so over here we should just be able to go and say return. Yep, we should be able to await, and then we just need to add an async here. This should just use entity framework core, and then yeah, if we don't find anything, yeah, if we don't find anything, then it's fine. We don't need to return anything. It'll just give us null. And then here we're going to say var saved change or rows affected. So we want to see how many rows were affected, and then we just need to add an async. Whenever we're dealing with asynchronous programming, we always need an await and we need an async if we wish to wait for that task, or for it just to kick off in the background altogether. So this will be rows affected, so that will do that. And then over here we should just be able to say response equal to update the link, save the changes, or rather await saving the changes. Okay, we need to do that. This will update it, this will save the changes, and then we just need to return the entity. So if we press Control KD, that will auto format that. And yeah, that pretty much implements this interface. So now let's see what we need to do for the visitors one. So it will be more or less the same thing, just different items at this point. Again, we'll copy the database, and what's this? This is basically going to go and say inject this, so it will create a new instance and pass it into the controller, into the constructor. And then what this is going to do now, we can just go and say okay, async, and then we should just be able to go and again say tiny link. Let's see what we did in the controller over here to add a new link. what do we actually need? We need the command. So create tiny link command. Let's see what we can do over here. I think we need to pass in a, oh, we did create a visitor. Oh, we need to pass in the visitor query. So when we add, oh, but we just need to change this so that it says, okay, I see it's because we copied and pasted. So we need to add a visit here, visit, call this visit. And then this will be, now we should just be able to copy this, change that, call this visit, and then we should just be able to repeat the same thing now and just try to pull by accident. So we should now be able to basically go and remove this and just say pass in the visit, add the visit, await saving the changes, return visit. Well, we actually need to store this response so that we get the latest item for what's there. We're gonna go say response, and then we're just gonna say entity. So then this will add the link, save the changes, and then return the entity. And then again over here, we should now be able to say, we should be able to just copy this. And again, we should just be able to say tiny link first to default. Yeah, and that basically just does everything else that we need. And then again, this will be identical to this, save changes. And then what this is going to do, update visitor, will be pretty much almost exactly the same as this. But the only difference is we're just going to go and say visits, update visits, and then we're gonna say await, save changes, and then return the entity. So now we have two interfaces for repositories that we can now go and just easily inject. We'll see what we can do with this shortly. So this is the tiny link. So we just need to move each of these to their own classes. So if you press Control dot, that will pop that up. Control dot. You need to be as lazy as possible. So try to let the compiler do as much work as possible. So here we have a visit query, and then yeah, we should just be able to put this in the models for now. Okay. So now the only thing that is outstanding is just creating a service that will deal with everything that we need to do. So let's go and create a service now. There is one here already. So the way that this is going to work is we're going to go say, hey, we need some sort of an interface, and we're going to call it iTinyLink service. And this is going to take in a link with the original link. That we don't actually need all of this. We can just, so let's go and update this first and foremost. So we no longer need all of these items. We really just need the original link to create the command, and then from the command we can get this from the parameters, and then we're gonna take in a command to create this. And then we need another command to create the repository as well. So in here in the visit repository, we get the visits by this, but when we add the visit, okay, I see what we're gonna do. Okay, so in essence over here now we need to be able to get the tiny link query by the query itself, which is the tiny link and the device and the IP address, but this is what we're going to get from the user or from the service, from wherever it's coming from. And then what this is going to now go do is basically we have a tiny link service. So right now this is going to inject those two repositories that we had into the service. So what an inject does, it just basically says, hey, rather than us depending on a concrete implementation, we are going to depend on an abstraction. So this is how we implement dependency inversion in .NET. So over here we can now simply go say, give us the iVisit repository. This will do visit repository. So remember to add an underscore if something is global and it is a private field. And then we also have the iVisit repository, and then we have the, what else do we have in here? What other repository? We also have the iTinyLink repository. So now we can just say TinyLink repository. So this will now go and inject the services. So let's indent our code properly. This is another important part of clean coding principles. Make sure that you name your variables very nicely and make them clear of what they're doing. Like here we have a TinyLink service that's implementing the TinyLink service. So let's move this to its own thing. We can maintain that over there. And then what we can now go and do is we can actually ask the services to create this. So what actually is going to happen is we can now just say visit TinyLink repository, add the link, and we can simply just make this an async task. So we might actually have to change these services a little bit to be this, and to also return a task, because it's going to need an await. So we're gonna have to do the same over here, and then let's see what we need. Add link. So then we're just gonna have response. We'll await this so that the change is saved to the database, and then we're simply just going to return the response. So from here, this will generate everything. It will create the link. It will return the link back up to the top, and then we're going to get back to the original link, but we also have to add tracking to it. So that's another thing. So let's now go and say in the service, get the original items. So first things first, we need to first, and before we add this link, we forgot one more thing. We need to see if we first need to see whether the link repository, if we can get this link by hash, and it is. So if we get this tiny link, and then this tiny link is not null, then we basically don't really need to return anything, because this we can just, so if this is not null, and then we can also store the variable for this, which is, so await, and then we can store a variable for this, and we can call this tiny link. You first have to say is not now. Let's see here. So we should just be able to say, okay, so first let's just try to get this. First we need to check, so this is going to return a tiny link by the hash. So then what we need to go and do is we need to say if the tiny link is not null, that means it already exists, so we don't need to do anything with it. We can just return that item, and if and only if it doesn't exist, then we add that item in. And then in terms of the original now,